What if all your spiritual work is backfiring not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're trying to become what you already are? You've been so devoted, you've meditated in silence, visualized with intensity, written your desires again and again, affirmed your dreams like mantras, and still, the shift never seems to last. There's a whisper that follows the silence, a quiet ache that echoes even in your most disciplined moments. Why hasn't it worked? What's still missing in me? Neville Goddard once said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." But how can you assume a feeling your nervous system still resists? How do you feel abundance when your body is carrying generations of scarcity? How do you embody wholeness when the cells in your skin are still vibrating with the memory of being broken? Joe Dispenza reminds us, your body is addicted to the past. The mind might believe in possibility, but the body is still loyal to the loop, still firing the same old neural patterns, still clinging to a history that contradicts the future you envisioned. That's why it often feels like you're fighting against yourself. Because you are. And maybe that's the root of it. Maybe the spiritual journey isn't about becoming someone new. Maybe it's about remembering not mentally, but vibrationally who you already are. Who you were before the world convinced you to forget. Before the trauma, before the fear, before the striving. It's not that the music of your soul stopped playing. It's that you've been tuning into the wrong frequency. Like trying to hear a symphony through the static of an untuned radio. The beauty is still there, always has been, but you've been listening to the noise of your own resistance, hoping it would one day transform into melody. And if some part of this, some soft, quiet part of you already knows what I'm saying is true, then stay with me. Don't click away. Don't turn your attention back to the noise. Because this is not just another video. This might be a homecoming. There is a particular kind of tiredness that isn't visible. It doesn't show in your posture or your voice. It lives deeper in the places where your hope used to breathe freely. It's the exhaustion of someone who's done the work again and again, but still feels like something essential hasn't landed. You've studied the books, attended the workshops, filled the journals with visions of a life that feels just out of reach, and yet, a quiet hollowness lingers. You wake up and feel the same ache you were trying to transcend. You light a candle, sit to meditate, but the silence doesn't feel sacred anymore. It feels heavy, like an echo of something that used to inspire you, now just reminding you of what still hasn't shifted. And you wonder, how can someone do so much and still feel so far? Many carry this silent fatigue, a spiritual burnout that isn't talked about, because it's wrapped in shame. The shame of believing that after all you're seeking, you should be better by now. The belief that if you just found the right method, the right mentor, the right mantra, maybe then the breakthrough would come. So you keep going, keep adding, keep fixing, keep correcting, but beneath it all, there's a hidden belief, rarely spoken but deeply felt, that something inside you is still broken. And that belief, not your effort, not your lack of effort, but that belief itself is what's been quietly running the show. Your nervous system learns through repetition, and the repetition of constantly searching, constantly correcting, constantly trying to improve. It teaches your body that who you are now is not enough, that you are always one more technique away from being whole. And then something strange happens. You don't just become tired, you become detached. The practices stop feeding you and start draining you. You're not just exhausted, you're spiritually malnourished. Not because you're lacking discipline, but because you never pause long enough to digest what you already know, to feel what you've already remembered, to trust what your soul keeps whispering. You were never meant to become. You were meant to return. There's a difference. A profound, quiet, liberating difference. It starts subtly. An image, a desire, a vision of a future self. More peaceful, more abundant, more aligned. And in that moment, something innocent turns heavy. The desire becomes a declaration. I am not yet that. The mistake isn't in wanting. The mistake is in believing that what you long for lives outside of you, that there's a distance between who you are and who you hope to be. And that gap, invisible but deeply felt, becomes the very thing that keeps you stuck. Neville Goddard said, "Creation is finished. You don't need to become what you already are. You don't need to climb towards your truth. You need to recognize it." But how can you recognize something that's been buried beneath years of effort, trauma, self-improvement, and striving. Every time you reach for a new version of yourself, your nervous system hears the same message. This version isn't enough. And because the body holds memory more deeply than the mind, the more you try to change, the more your biology interprets the desire as evidence of lack. Neuroscience confirms this. The brain does not interpret desire as possibility, it codes it as absence. Unless that desire is paired with emotional coherence, your nervous system records it as a void. A void you then begin to orbit around. You affirm it, visualize it, write it down with hope. But the feeling beneath remains one of separation, of waiting. And that's why so many intentions repel instead of attract. Not because the vision is wrong, but because the emotion behind the vision is out of alignment. You can't manifest a future while emotionally rehearsing the pain of not having it. So the question becomes, what if the thing you're trying to become is not a destination, but a memory? A memory that lives not in your intellect, but in your frequency. A state of being that has no roadmap, because it has no distance. To remember is not to think. It is to feel, to let a sensation emerge that says, this is familiar, this is home. And that moment, that return, is what reprograms the loop. Not through more effort, but through resonance, through truth, through the radical realization that maybe, just maybe, you've been it all along. There is a hidden identity many seekers unknowingly wear, the one who is always climbing, always striving, always almost arriving. It sounds noble, it looks devoted, but beneath the surface, it carries a subtle violence, the constant suggestion that who you are today is not quite enough. This is the spiritual warrior archetype, the one who believes in effort, discipline, transcendence, but also the one who never truly rests. Because rest, in that paradigm, feels like giving up. Stillness feels like regression. And wholeness becomes a horizon you chase, but never reach. The result is a life lived on a treadmill of transformation. You feel like you're running up a downward escalator. The harder you push, the more distant your peace becomes. Your worth becomes entangled with your progress. And so you keep climbing, not out of inspiration, but out of fear. Fear that if you stop moving, the truth will catch up with you. And that truth might say, you're still not there. But what if the journey wasn't meant to be a climb? What if the impulse to fix yourself is the very thing keeping you fractured? Because every time you try to improve yourself, you reinforce the identity of someone broken, someone in need of fixing, someone whose value is conditional upon their growth. And growth, real growth, does not come from shame. It does not come from the chronic belief that something is wrong with you. It comes from remembering your essence, from softening into your own enoughness, from allowing the sacred to rise, not because you've earned it, but because it was always there. The addiction to self-improvement is subtle. It wears the mask of wisdom, but it often hides a deeper fear. The fear of being still with who you are now, of meeting yourself without an agenda, without a goal, without the next step. And yet, that's where the remembering begins. Not at the top of the mountain, but in the quiet refusal to keep climbing. In the moment you choose to feel, not fix. To rest, not run. To return, not pursue. There are moments in life that don't just pass, they imprint. They leave a texture on your being, a frequency in your cells. You may not consciously recall them, but your body remembers. Your field remembers. There is a version of you that already lived in wholeness, already felt deeply loved, already embodied a quiet power. And though you may feel far from that version now, it is not lost. It is simply dormant, waiting for resonance. Bruce Lipton's work in epigenetics reveals a powerful truth. Your cells are not merely carriers of DNA. They are storers of emotional memory. This means that who you believe yourself to be is not just written in thought, it's encoded in vibration. Your body has been rehearsing a story, sometimes for decades, but underneath that repetition, there are dormant frequencies, not fantasies, not projections, memories. So often, the spiritual path is treated as an accumulation of knowledge, of tools, of new ways of being. But what if the true path is more like an excavation? What if it's not about becoming anything new, but about uncovering what the world taught you to suppress? Joe Dispenza teaches that we can recondition the body to a new identity. But here's the deeper layer: the identity you're reconditioning into isn't always a new construct. Sometimes, it's the original you, the one that existed before the pain, before the programming, before the survival. And the key to reawakening that self isn't effort, it's remembrance. Not intellectual recall, but vibrational reconnection. To feel again, even for a moment, what it was like to move through the world with softness, with certainty, with sacredness. To call back into your field not an imagined future, but a lived essence. This is not nostalgia. It's not romanticizing the past. It's recognizing that within you, there are emotional signatures still alive. And those signatures can be reactivated. Not by striving, but by stillness. Not by becoming, but by remembering. So much of what we chase in the outer world is not about the world at all. It's about trying to feel something different within. We work hard to change the reflection, thinking that if the mirror looks better, maybe we'll feel better too. But here's the quiet truth: you can spend a lifetime polishing the glass and still never see your light clearly if the source behind it remains dim. The world, as many spiritual traditions and quantum perspectives affirm, is not separate from you. It's not just happening to you, it's happening through you. It's a vibrational echo, a projection of your most consistent emotions, not your most positive thoughts. And that echo doesn't respond to what you say, it responds to what you believe is true in when you're silent. This is why affirmation alone often falls flat. You can speak beauty, abundance, love, but if the core frequency underneath is fear, lack, or doubt, the mirror reflects that instead. Not to punish you, not to test you, but to show you what's still active inside. The metaphor becomes clear. Imagine a mirror covered in dust. You wipe and scrub, trying to see more clearly. But what you're trying to fix isn't the glass. It's the light source behind it. And no amount of polishing will change what the mirror reflects if the inner light stays obscured. This is where many seekers become trapped. They pour energy into altering circumstances, people, environments, but the frequency that created those realities remains untouched. Because they're fixing symptoms, not the signal. And the signal is always internal. Spiritual maturity begins when you stop blaming the reflection and start tending to the source. When you realize that external conditions are not your enemy, they are your echo. And echoes don't lie, they only repeat. So the path forward is not to chase a different reflection. It's to adjust the light, to soften the fear, to expand the love, to feel the feeling that matches your truth, and let that feeling ripple outward. Because when the inner light shifts, the mirror doesn't need cleaning. It simply reflects the radiance you had forgotten was yours all along. There's a quiet panic that often hides beneath the spiritual journey, the fear of losing control. The fear that if you let go, even for a moment, everything might fall apart. So you cling, you plan, you visualize with precision, you script every detail of the life you think you need to feel safe. And yet, in that very act of control, you interrupt the flow of the energy you're trying to call in. Control is not clarity. Control is contraction. It shrinks your field. It narrows your vibration. It tells the universe, I don't trust the unknown. And when that message is active, it overrides your words, your rituals, your intentions. Because energy doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to what you embody. There's also a neurochemical loop at play, the dopamine trap. You get a hit when you visualize, when you set the intention, when you script the outcome. But then, nothing. Days pass, silence, doubt creeps in, and you crash. The chase gives you a high, but the waiting brings the low. And that pattern, that cycle of hope and despair, fractures your coherence. Coherence is the key. It's what aligns your heart, brain, and body into a unified field. But coherence doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender, from presence, from releasing the pressure to make it happen, and remembering the feeling of what already is. There is a simple but powerful shift that can begin this realignment. It's not dramatic. It doesn't require hours of practice. Just 3 subtle invitations to your system. Stillness. Create space inside you that isn't filled with striving. Breathe. Let things settle. Let your nervous system exhale. Acceptance. not resignation, not defeat. Just the soft awareness that this moment is not wrong, that nothing needs fixing in the now. And then, sensory identity activation. Not asking, how do I get there? But gently wondering, what would it feel like if I already was? Not as a fantasy, but as a frequency. Not as a goal, but as a gateway. Because in truth, your future isn't something you chase. It's a state you allow, and that state becomes magnetic the moment control softens into coherence. There's a myth woven deep into the fabric of spiritual culture, the myth that manifestation is about creating something that doesn't yet exist. That you must strive, visualize, and perform the correct rituals to bring it into being. But what if manifestation isn't about creation at all? What if it's about reception? Not building something new, but tuning into what has always been available to you. The authentic self, the version of you that is whole, magnetic, deeply aligned, is not a future version. It's a buried one, hidden beneath layers of programming, conditioning, and performance. And when you begin to peel back those layers, something sacred happens. You don't discover, you remember. You remember what it felt like to trust your own rhythm. You remember the quiet certainty of being connected. You remember joy not as a goal, but as a baseline. This remembrance isn't nostalgia, it's resonance. And in that resonance, your field shifts, your energy shifts, and so does your reality. This is the missing link in most spiritual practice. We affirm the future while forgetting to feel the truth of the present. We try to overwrite the past instead of listening to what it still wants to reveal. But when you move from the energy of return, not pursuit, you stop trying to prove and start allowing. A practical invitation arises here, not a list of affirmations that try to force belief, but something quieter, more sacred, an I am memory journal. A space not to dream of who you might become, but to declare in the now who you've always been beneath the noise. Words written not from lack, but from remembrance. Not to convince yourself, but to meet yourself, right from the place that already knows, that already remembers, that doesn't chase, it calls back. It gathers the fragments. It speaks not from desperation, but from embodiment. Because manifestation isn't magic, it's memory. It's the field responding to your resonance. And when your energy remembers who you are, the universe doesn't need to be convinced. It simply reflects. This is the moment where the seeking quiets, where the striving softens, where the noise of self-improvement finally loses its grip. And in that stillness, something ancient stirs, not a new self to achieve, but an old truth to remember. Bruce Lipton teaches that 95% of our lives are governed by subconscious programming, not by our conscious desires, but by the silent agreements we made with pain, fear, survival. And most of those programs are not ours. They were inherited, absorbed, learned, which means they can also be unlearned. Unlearning is not erasure, it's not violent, it's not abrupt, it's a gentle untangling, a soft rebellion against everything you were told you had to be in order to be loved. It's saying no to the noise so you can hear the voice underneath, the one that has always whispered, "You are already it." Neville Goddard gave us an image so tender, so piercing in its simplicity. The wish fulfilled is not something you chase, it's a version of you waiting in the dark, asking to be remembered, not created, not perfected, just remembered. And maybe that's all healing really is. Not becoming something new, but saying yes to what you had to silence to survive. Saying yes to the self that sings softly beneath the trauma, beneath the performance, beneath the pressure. Picture a piano, dusty, forgotten, not broken, just unplayed. The keys are still intact. The strings still hold tension. The wood still vibrates when touched, but no one has sat long enough to let it sing. And so it waits, not for repair, but for remembrance. For fingers that remember they were born to create music, not noise. If something inside you stirred during this journey, it wasn't by accident. It was a signal, a calling from the version of you that never left, only dimmed, and now, maybe, is ready to return. So let this be your echo. You don't need more fixing. You don't need more proving. You just need to remember. And if that remembering has already begun, then you're not alone. This isn't a path of achievement. It's a path of homecoming, one step at a time, one truth at a time. one breath, back into yourself. Not every transformation is loud. Some begin in a whisper, a subtle recognition, a gentle return, not with fireworks, but with quiet clarity. If something in this journey touched you, if a part of your inner knowing stirred from sleep, then the remembering has already begun. This isn't the end of the road. It's the soft opening of a door that was never locked. A door you may have walked past for years, thinking you needed a key, a guide, a ritual to enter. But now, perhaps, you see, the door was always part of you. It opens inward. So as this moment comes to a close, let it settle into your cells, not as inspiration to chase, but as truth to live. You are not broken. You are not late. You are not lacking. You are simply waking up from a long dream of separation. And in the light of this new awareness, there is nothing to fix, only more of yourself to welcome home. If you feel something resonating, not in your thoughts, but in your body, your breath, your being, that is the vibration of remembrance. That is the field aligning. That is coherence forming, not from control, but from trust. So stay with that, nurture that, let it deepen. And if you choose to walk this path further, know that you are not alone. There are others, quiet, sensitive, sacred, who are remembering alongside you. This is not a journey of answers. It is a journey of return. Return to the sound beneath the silence. Return to the truth beneath the techniques. Return to the self that never needed to be fixed, only felt. And if the remembering continues to call you, let echo through your choices, your voice, your presence, not as performance, but as permission for yourself and for others. Because every time you remember who you are, you help the world do the same. This isn't a channel of promises. It's not a space of quick fixes or instant miracles. It's a quiet room in the noise, a place to breathe, to reflect, to feel deeply what so often goes unfelt. A place for those who have searched long enough to realize they were never truly lost, only distracted from their essence. If something opened in you here, in just a little, then there is resonance. And resonance is no small thing. It's a sacred alignment, a moment when your inner frequency recognizes itself in words, in energy, in presence. That recognition isn't random. It's the language of return. So if you're drawn to continue, not out of urgency, but out of quiet knowing, then this space is for you. Not to be guided from outside, but to be reminded from within. Because no voice, no video, no teaching will ever hold more truth than the one already living in your heart. The remembering doesn't end here. It unfolds, layer by layer, as you choose presence over pressure, connection over control, remembrance over reinvention. And each time you do, the field shifts, subtly, powerfully, quietly echoing the truth you no longer need to chase. This isn't about becoming anything. It's about no longer pretending to be what you're not. And if you're ready, not in certainty, but in sincerity, walk with us, not toward something new, but back into something ancient, soft, and profoundly yours. No more fixing, just returning.